that some of the big brick investors are adjusting the way they operate and are, as Tony points to the experience with the Chinese and Angola, they are using much more. They are doing much more capacity building in the local economies. They are importing less and using more local labor and training and so on. Is that?
No, I think there's certainly a learning curve, and China in particular is continually evolving and transforming the nature of their engagement with Africa because they're clever and they've got a long-term vision. But again, firstly, by BRIC engagement in Africa, we're primarily talking about Chinese engagement in Africa. The level of investment and involvement in Africa on the part of Brazil has been confined to some great projects in Angola and bits and pieces that Vale is doing elsewhere. The Indian engagement in Africa is growing and will doubtlessly grow, but at the moment is not that relevant on a continent-wide scale. And likewise, the Russian engagement, which is pretty restricted and sporadic. And therefore, we're talking about China versus Western interest, and by Western interest, I presume we're talking about America and Europe. So it's not that difficult to compete. Obviously, China can deliver infrastructure quicker and bigger and cheaper than anyone else in certain instances, and therefore one can't compete with them if you want to build a railway corridor in some cases. They have a considerable appetite and means for strategic metals and minerals and oil and gas, which creates flow of funds and gives exit opportunities for Western interests and co-investment opportunities for Western interests, because a lot of Chinese interests recognize the much greater history and connectivity and understanding and local intelligence of French interests and British interests than they have. So they're happy to co-invest and work together with and buy from Western interests. So it's a cooperative thing. It's not necessarily a competitive thing. So, I really don't see it as us and them, and I don't see it as something that is, a Chinese model for Africa or a Western model for Africa. It's a mixed model for Africa, but increasingly it's an African model for Africa. And the Chinese engagement will continue to be balanced. Their vast means and strategic appetite will continue to be balanced by the degree of reticence and distrust on the part of African governments who because they're so big and have such vast long-term strategic vision and appetite, are probably quite rightly nervous of Chinese dominance. And therefore, in a country like Angola, where the Chinese came in very strong with big soft loan facilities and some big offshore oil and gas investments, some agri-investments, etc., there's a sense from the Angolan government that they're very happy with it and they love the Chinese, but they want it to be balanced with other involvements, and they don't want one party who has a lot of weight and a lot of power and a lot of money to become too dominant in any one sector. So even where they can do better, bigger, quicker than anybody else, governments and local interests will still want others to do some of what they could otherwise do.